With our appetites now well satiated, we find ourselves in the second segment of day 3, that is the final day of IPRD 2025. Without further ado, I now request you to sit back and enjoy a sessional overview video, which focuses on this particular segment of the day.
With a horizon that stretches across every major power's map, the Pacific Islands stand at the intersection of climate, competition, and conscience. Europe watches the Pacific not as a distant theatre, but as a mirror, a place where counterbalancing power is less about force and more about foresight. Could their approach show us how strategic neutrality might become a strength in itself? Meanwhile, Papua New Guinea's story is one of quiet capability. With shipyards replacing aid camps, sailors trained to defend their own waters, they offer us a grounded lesson on how cooperation can turn distance into direction. With territories spanning across both oceans, France shows us that the Indo-Pacific is not just a place, but a pattern, one drawn by the geometry of alliances, not the geography of borders. Leading by example with integration, diplomacy, and innovation, their Indo-Pacific policy is proof that distance is no deterrent to engagement. And from India, a view of the Pacific that mirrors its own aspirations, linking the Forum for Indo-Pacific Islands cooperation to security and growth for all in the region. Because where islands speak, continents must listen. Together, these dialogues remind us that the smallest nations often carry the largest truths, that partnership, not presence, defines influence in the Pacific. As the day unfolds, 4 anchoring frameworks meet a single horizon, that of regional cooperation. The Indian Ocean Commission shows how islands can institutionalize unity, building frameworks that transcend their size. Indonesia's voice adds rhythm to this symphony, a reminder that ASEAN remains central and alignment is strength. From Europe's vantage point comes the call for coherence, that the Indo-Pacific's many dialogues must one day converge into one. And from Australia, a pragmatic optimism. Partnerships must not only protect but also project. Ensuring security becomes a shared service, not a single nation burden. We conclude by affirming once again that maritime cooperation is not a one-time choice, but is instead a continuum. From seabeds to islands, from frameworks to futures, the pattern is clear. Capacity builds presence, capability builds confidence, but it is collaboration that builds our future.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now ease into the professional session. However, before we begin, I request everybody to kindly settle down. I would like to reiterate a few administrative points. Aside from administrative ease, they're also greatly important for the panelists on stage to be able to convey their points properly to you. Firstly, please keep your phones muted at all times. Please ensure that your mobile phones are muted or switched off. Note that the biodatas of the speakers and the moderators are in the event booklet that was given to you during registration. Please refer to them. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite the speakers and moderators for this session on stage. We have an excellent lineup, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Gudrun Wacker, Ambassador Peter Illau, Commander Marianne Perrondoise, and Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan. Please give them a big hand as they join us on stage. And by way of the moderator, we have the excellent Vice Admiral Anne Cullere. Once again, for the members in the audience who are just joining us, please make sure that your mobile phones are muted. You have the biodatas available to you. And with that, I hand over the proceedings to the moderator of this session. Admiral Cullere, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Audience, students, cadets, this is our blue Earth, as you can see. And there is one small dot right in the middle. What would this small dot mean? Give me an answer. Try it. It's very easy. It's among a vast expanse of water, as you can see. It's right in the middle. What are we talking about? Okay, I'm taking my glasses off. Do I see an arm somewhere? Come on, give it a try. I heard it, French Polynesia. I told you, France brags a lot. Okay, this is French Polynesia. It's not the Nemo point. You know what the Nemo point is? This point which is the furthest away from any living place. No, 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 it's French Polynesia. French Polynesia, one of those Pacific islands, because we're going to talk about why Pacific islands matter today. And I wanted to show you this just to make you realize, first of all, how far away they are, because French Polynesia is part of them, and the vast expanse of water that they have around them. So it is a privilege today to talk about those why the Pacific Islands matter. And first of all, please allow me to set the scene for the benefit of our young audience. The Pacific Island countries form a cluster of 14 states. I'll be speaking like a teacher. I'm a little bit afraid, but I'm setting the scene for you here. So I'm aware that a lot of you know already about this. A cluster of 14 states scattered across tropical expanse of the Pacific Ocean, lying between Asia, Australia, and the Americas. And I will try and shift to the next one. Right, here you are, scattered all over the place. I've tried to find a map which would not show the political arrangements here, because I think some of our panelists here will talk about this. So it's just to show you the scattered islands everywhere among this vast expanse of water. And the main fact here is that although their combined land area is very small, those islands stretch over 51.8 million of square kilometers of water. And the Earth represents only 303,000 square kilometers, right? 300,000 square kilometers vis-a-vis 51.8 million square kilometers of water. These islands are grouped into these three distinct regions: Micronesia, Melanesia, and Polynesia, each with its own cultural and geographic characters. Do you know that we have in those islands more than 1,000 languages spoken? And most of them are to be found in Papua New Guinea. So politically, those Pacific islands vary widely. And again, I won't touch on this. Some are independent nations, others within free association with larger powers. So today, the Pacific Islands are on the front lines of what I would summarize as two existential struggles. First, a war of influences as global powers compete for economic, military, and diplomatic leverage. Historically, the island nations have been at the center of colonial competition, endured devastation during World War II. The Pacific battles served also as major nuclear testing sites for the United States, France, and the UK, and more broadly have become potential vote banks for major powers at the United Nations. And nowadays, China's expanding presence alongside the engagement of traditional partners like Australia, New Zealand, the United States, Japan, and India has made, and France, of course, has made the Pacific a critical area for strategic competition. But this is not just a story of great power rivalry. It is also a story of Pacific Island nations asserting their agency, navigating these pressures, and seeking partnerships that respect their sovereignty and priorities. And second, and probably most urgently, the Pacific Islands face the defining challenge of our time, should I say the planetary crisis, or climate change. Rising sea levels, extreme weather, ocean acidification threaten not only their environment, but their very survival. Around 80% of Pacific Islanders depend on subsistence and semi-subsistence farming and fishing, and so they are very highly vulnerable to changing climatic conditions. And they also confront serious transnational threats such as IUU fishing. To meet those dual pressures of strategic competition and environmental vulnerability, the Pacific Island countries have built one of the most interconnected regional systems in the world. And at its core stands the Pacific Island Forum, the region's political and security anchor, which unites 18 members, including Australia and New Zealand, under the shared Blue Pacific identity. Everyone's heard about the Boe Declaration on Regional Security and the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, because those nations here don't see themselves as small island states. They see themselves as an overarching blue continent in this beautiful metaphor. Complementing this are specialized mechanisms as the Pacific Community, which provides technical and scientific support, and the Forum Fisheries Agency, which enhances maritime surveillance and enforcement across vast exclusive EEZ. The islands also leverage partnerships beyond the region. The Forum for India-Pacific Islands Cooperation, FIPIC, and I think Arnold Chuan will touch upon this, Japan's Pacific Islands Leaders Meeting, Australia's Pacific Step Up, US Pacific Partnership Strategy, and whether we like it or not, for example, the China Pacific Islands Foreign Ministers Meeting, all aimed at capacity and capability building in governance, policy, and resilience. On the security and defense front, Pacific states are deepening practical partnerships. Papua New Guinea's new Puk-Puk Treaty with Australia commits both nations to mutual defense and coordinated capacity building. And again, whether we like it or not, the China-Solomon Islands Security Agreement reflects the region's expanding strategic choices, enabling cooperation on policing and public order, and the long-standing US ship-rider programs enhance maritime surveillance across the vast EEZ. And then we have the France arrangement. I touched upon this 2 days ago, involving France, Australia, and New Zealand, and the Pacific Quad, not the big Quad, the Pacific Quad, comprising Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and Japan, highlight the growing emphasis on cooperative disaster response, humanitarian assistance, fight against IUU fishing, and regional security coordination in an increasingly contested Pacific. Together, these arrangements, regional, bilateral, multilateral, illustrate quite well a region asserting collective organization and sovereign choice in shaping its own security and development future. Today, our panel of distinguished panelists, experts, will explore why the Pacific Island matters as a region of resilience, innovation, and global significance. Each speaker will offer a unique perspective on how Pacific Island nations are navigating these dual challenges and what their struggles and successes mean for all of us. First, we will hear from Dr. Gudrun Wacker of the German Institute for International Security Affairs. Dr. Wacker will examine options for cooperative counterbalancing of China in the South Pacific. Next, Ambassador Peter Illau, former Chief of Defense Staff and Ambassador of Papua New Guinea to Indonesia, will share his perspective on Papua New Guinea, driving capacity and capability among Pacific Island states. Following Ambassador Illau, Commander Marianne Perrondoise, Associate Research Fellow at the French Institute for International and Strategic Affairs in France, will discuss France and the Pacific Islands' integration into the Indo-Pacific mainstream. And finally, but not least, Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan will address India and the Pacific Islands, leveraging the forum, the FIPIC. As we listen to each speaker, I encourage you to reflect on this. How can the international community support the Pacific Islands in turning the twin challenges of geopolitical competition and climate change into opportunities for genuine partnership and sustainable development? At the end of the panel, of course, we will open the floor for a broader discussion. With that, Dr. Wacker, the floor is yours.
That's going to be tricky. With this? Okay, thank you. Okay, my presentation is called Options for Cooperative Counterbalancing of China in the South Pacific, but I'm not quite sure that I was up to the task because the cooperative counterbalancing seems to be very difficult in that case. So here is what I plan to do. I will also talk a little bit about the Pacific Islands more general. Some of this has already been said by Anne, but it doesn't do any harm to say it twice. I will talk about development aid or trends in aid to these islands, and then about the United States and China, and then the other actors that are in the region and try to support these islands. And then in the end, I will talk a little bit about what can be done in a better fashion, maybe. So this is another map of the area. You see Australia and New Zealand. Well, New Zealand is only half. And the vast ocean area surrounding these islands. So it reminded me of what we heard yesterday, that these are not small islands, but big ocean states. And here you have a map because politically, Anne already pointed out, this is quite complicated. You see here that some of the islands are independent states and others are associated or still owned by other countries. I have to fumble with my things here a little bit. So you see the exclusive economic zones. It also gives you an impression of the relationship between the landmass, only 300,000 square miles, and most of that is Papua New Guinea, I guess, and then 7.7 million square miles of exclusive economic zones. And the color coding has to do with the countries that are associated with these islands. This is the membership. This is a French map, so it has one category, visits of the president, which refers to Macron's visits to the Pacific Islands. But you see in which organizations these islands are members. And here are a few features to make the situation even more complicated. So you have 12 truly independent states, and then you have 9 dependencies or territories that belong to other countries: the Cook Islands, American Samoa, New Caledonia, French Polynesia, Guam, and the Northern Mariana Islands. If you look at the colors here, I have some red oval countries. These are the so-called COFA islands, which are associated very closely with the United States. Basically, the United States have exclusive military rights on these islands. Then we have the lilac squares, Tonga, Papua New Guinea, and Fiji. These are the only 3 countries who actually have their own military forces. This is important to know when we talk about how these countries can deal with security challenges. Then the yellow triangle is in association with New Zealand, so it's Niue and Cook Islands. And finally, you have 3 green squares. Those are the only diplomatic allies Taiwan has left in the Pacific, among the Pacific Islands. It used to be more, but now it's reduced to 3. I also want to point out, because we are in India here, that 9 of these islands are still members of the Commonwealth. So this might also be a point for India to leverage in their relations. And there are 3 French overseas territories: French Polynesia, New Caledonia, and Wallis and Futuna. And I think this is something that Marianne will talk about later in detail. So why is the region important? We already heard a little bit in the introduction to this panel. I think the exclusive economic zones and the size of the exclusive economic zones is one thing. So fishing is a very important industry, if you will, in the area, especially tuna. This, for example, is important to Japan. And Japan is one of the external actors that is very involved in these islands. Then you have raw materials, including seabed. So this is one of the future areas we will be talking about. There's critical infrastructure, subsea cables, ports, and airfields, an area where the Chinese are especially active. And these islands are also an important voice in the United Nations, not by themselves, but in this grouping small island developing states. Altogether, there are 39 states and 18 associate members. This is something the Chinese like, because they try to get support for what they want at the UN level, and they collect basically the approval of such organizations. As I already said, only 3 Pacific islands have their own military forces, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, and Tonga. And the challenges are obvious domestically, and I would say the biggest challenge, because it's really existential, as Anne has already pointed out, is climate change, rising sea levels, etc., the natural disasters that come with it, but also basic health infrastructure, and the lack of infrastructure in general is a big domestic challenge for most of the islands. Regional, you have illegal fishing, transnational crime, and again, climate change. This is not only affecting one island. And then you have the geostrategic rivalry between the US and China. But I would argue, from the perspective of the US and China, if we talk about the geostrategic rivalry, Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Indian Ocean are probably more important, while for Australia and New Zealand, the Pacific Islands, they are their direct neighborhood. So for them, this is a vital part of the world. These are the regional institutions and groupings that exist. Pacific Island Forum is probably the most important of those, but there is a wider Pacific community that cooperates on technical, scientific research, policy and training services. Then you have other organizations, Anne mentioned some of them, so the Fisheries Agency, but also cooperation on customs, etc. You have the Pacific Response Group. They is mainly focused on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, consisting of Australia, Fiji, France, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and Tonga, and the South Pacific Defense Ministers meeting with Australia, Chile, strangely, Fiji, France, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and Tonga. And there are several observers, among them Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And as was already mentioned, there is something like the Pacific Quad, and I think Anne talked about this in her first presentation in the podium discussion, the acronym FRANZ, which is basically France, Australia, and New Zealand. They also have a tradition of cooperating. We'll talk now about foreign aid to these islands, and as you can easily see, Australia is by far the biggest donor to the region, and then you have more or less at the same level the next four, which are China, Japan, New Zealand, and the United States. These are only the data till 2022. There is sort of a hike in 2021, and this spike is due to the fact that a lot of the vaccine efforts, etc., went to the Pacific Islands. So you have a spike during the first year of COVID, and then it sort of petered off. And you can see here the trend again, this time going to 2024. And for the first time, you see the European Union institutions were at number 6, but still a very insignificant donor to the region. So if we, by the way, there is a wonderful database by the Lowy Institute where you can look up the donor countries, what they give, what the projects are, and which islands they give the most to, which I used quite extensively, and it's interactive, so it's a very good data set. So the trends in development aid since 22 are: first, you have a contraction of aid. Because of COVID or post-COVID, it dropped, and the Ukraine war. So it dropped by 18% from 2021 to 2022. You have a fragmentation of donors and projects. Why is this important? Because it's a big bureaucratic burden to the countries in question. The more fragmented your donors are, the higher the effort to manage these projects and do the right calculations afterwards. So this is not a good trend. And here you see already one of the obstacles. Foreign aid is usually given by one country and not in a coordinated fashion. There is also a trend to focus more on infrastructure instead on human resources, capacity building. So this means that there is a securitization in aid, and US aid is focused mainly on the 3 islands that are associated with the United States. China is back now as the second largest donor. There was a lull during the COVID years, but now it's really back and has invested a lot, especially since Trump came back to office. I can come back to that. And there seems to be more focus on geopolitical considerations and less on sustainability. So despite all the hype we have in talking about the significance of these islands in geostrategic terms and other terms, there is actually a contraction of aid overall. I will go through the individual countries very quickly because of time reasons. I see that there is a clear difference between the Biden administration and the second Trump administration. We all know about the punitive tariffs and the being dosed of US aid, so this makes a big difference. During the Biden administration, there was a lot of effort in expanding the diplomatic presence, but this has not quite happened. From the side of the United States, there was a Pacific Island Forum summit hosted by Biden in 2022 and 23. There were more than 100 projects on health and climate and economic development in the islands. And more or less all this has disappeared during Trump too. We don't know exactly what the effect of that will be, but if you look at the next slide, you see that even the 3 COFA countries, the Marshall Islands, Federated States of Micronesia and Palau, got 10% each of punitive tariffs, and some others like Fiji even got 35% of punitive tariff, and US aid was cut across the board, which seems to hit especially Papua New Guinea. if I see that correctly. Okay, let's now turn to China, because if we want to counterbalance China, it's of course important to know what China is actually doing. So what are China's interests, and what is it doing there? First of all, I think that China's diplomatic presence in the region is quite strong if you compare it to other countries, maybe with the exception of Australia and New Zealand. China is basically everywhere now, and they also have military attaches attached to their embassies in the region. They focus on infrastructure, roads, airstrips, ports, stuff like that, but also on climate change and disaster relief projects. There are a number of security agreements focused on law enforcement and policing. There is the access to raw materials, of course. This is always important from the Chinese perspective, so fishing, timber, and critical raw materials. And reducing Taiwan's international space is always a top priority for the Chinese side. Countering US influence comes as almost like a side effect of all these activities. And I have to say, because we talked earlier about the agency of the islands, this is welcome to the Pacific Islands. I mean, you get an offer to get additional aid, to have your infrastructure upgraded or improved, and you say yes, of course, without looking at the possible downsides. So this is all welcome to these, 4 minutes. Okay, so let's talk a minute about where China made progress and where the limits are. So I think China has made quite a few inroads in terms of economic, diplomatic presence. They have also snatched away 2 diplomatic allies from Taiwan, which is important from their perspective. After Trump came back to office, they stepped up their activities in the Pacific Islands. They had another summit meeting with the Pacific Islands. They started 100 small but beautiful projects, reminding us of the big beautiful bill of Donald Trump, focused on local communities on the islands. And already in 2022, they signed a security agreement with the Solomon Islands, which we all still don't know what is in this agreement, but they tried to push this at a regional level, and 11 of the islands refused to sign this agreement. So here you see the limits of the Chinese efforts. They were not quite as successful to roll this out region-wide. Australia, as I said, one of the biggest donors. I will not go into the details here. You see the catchwords. New Zealand also, I think almost 80% of New Zealand's foreign aid go to these islands. Japan, always among the 5 top donors. They have their own leaders meeting with the Pacific Islands. The European Union and the European states, I would say they contribute to the fragmentation of aid there. France, I don't have to go into because Marianne Perron-Doise will talk about France later. And the UK came up with a quite clever plan. It's called Filling the Gaps. So they will try to complement what others do and avoid duplication, which I think is a good prescription for any middle power who wants to make a difference there. The European Union has its own approach to the Pacific Islands, but we have to see that, yes, within the Indo-Pacific strategy of the European Union, this has become a bit more prominent, but we're still not one of the biggest players in the region. India has its own farm at FIPIC, and Admiral Chauhan will talk about that later, so again, I can leave it. So I try to, in the last minute I will try to look at some structural issues here. You see that different countries have different priorities. Australia, New Zealand, the EU and the UK give very strong financial support to the regional initiatives and organizations like the Pacific Island Forum itself, while the US, China and also India give almost no support to the regional initiatives and focus on bilateral aid. The US, Australia and China focus on health, security and infrastructure, while New Zealand, Japan and the European Union focus more on the non-traditional security issues. So you can ask yourself, who competes with China on what and how? I think there are a few challenges we see for better coordination among third countries. First of all, the Pacific Islands themselves are not interested at all in becoming a playground for US-China strategic rivalry. For them, no zero-sum logic exists. Then you have these conflicting goals, geopolitical interests versus national and regional needs and interests. And I think this is one thing we should always do, is listen to the recipient country before we start any activity there. Then you have the crass contrast between the existential need of the Pacific Islands to fight climate change and Donald Trump pulling out of the Paris Agreement. And you also have the fact that not always do the interests of the third countries align, which is, for example, the case on deep sea mining. Then for India, the question is, go it alone as a specific South-South cooperation, or will India try to coordinate with traditional donors? So this is my final slide, although my time's up already. The first effort should be to substitute for the ODA cuts by the United States. This is a task for all of us. There are some concrete measures, and some have been mentioned during this conference already. I think ship rider agreements are a very important aspect of that. Coast Guard cooperation and law enforcement cooperation, training programs. I think that India is very good on that, training programs and educating people. Then a stronger coordination with the main donors, Australia and New Zealand, on fisheries, climate change and humanitarian disaster relief would be desirable, but I don't know if it's achievable, because in the end, at the moment, who is competing or trying to counterbalance China the most, it's Australia, not necessarily the US. Filling the gaps can be a good approach for a medium-sized country. And then to make things easier, because it's hard to organize these summits with the Pacific Islands, it would be an idea to include the Pacific Islands as a topic in 2+2 formats that already exist in the G7, put it on the G7 agenda or other bilateral meetings. And then these summits with the Pacific Islands could also happen at the sideline of the UN General Assembly. I think that India has done that once, holding this FIPIC at the fringe of the General Assembly, but this would it would have synergy effects, let's put it this way. And finally, India could become a partner of the Blue Pacific Initiative. This is a pretty new thing. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wacker. Just a quick takeaway, because time is already up, so I have to give the floor to Ambassador Illau. Just a very quick takeaway. I noticed that what we can take away from this is the aid to those countries who, I wouldn't say desperately, but are in need of aid because they're facing so many vulnerabilities, where this aid is being contracted for a number of reasons and fragmented in volumes and aims, and also aims. So we have a number of countries, including, of course, the big neighbor Australia and China, vying for presence for different reasons, very different reasons, and another bunch of third partners who are also there and present. But at the end of the day, the aid remains fragmented and the aims differ. Dr. Wagner gave us a number of ways and paths to follow, so maybe in the audience we can go back to this afterwards during the questions. Without further ado, please let me introduce Ambassador Illau for his brief. Thank you, Ambassador.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Chairman Admiral Singh and Director General, Vice Admiral Chauhan, all your fellows of NMF and all the students, our colleagues, and I believe people from our diplomatic corps are here as well. Good afternoon. I've decided to cut short some of my slides with the interest of time, so you won't see the traditional scope and content, etc., but I will basically cover all of that verbally. Now, the Papua New Guinea embraces both the challenges and opportunities of its strategic location. Its enduring role is to anchor regional stability, navigate shifts in currents, and steer with purpose. Papua New Guinea sees India as a civilized power and maritime democracy. India has consistently demonstrated its commitment to the Pacific through transformational partnerships grounded in sovereignty, resilience, and mutual respect. From defense and digital connectivity to climate and capacity building. So we see India stands beside Papua New Guinea and the Pacific family as a trusted ally. The partnership is reflected not just in formal agreements, but also in officer training, idea exchange, and a shared vision for a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. India's Act East and Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative align closely with Papua New Guinea's strategic compass, one that champions unity, non-alignment, and the protection of maritime commons. As today's dialogue begins, let me reaffirm that the Indo-Pacific is not a battleground of rivalry, but a canvas of cooperation, where India and Papua New Guinea continue to paint a future of trust, purpose, and enduring friendship. Let me use a metaphor of the traditional canoe. In Melanesia seafaring tradition, the keel beneath the canoe is unseen. Yet, it is what keeps that vessel balanced and true. It does not shout, but it speaks through stability. It does not steer, but it ensures the vessel does not drift. That is Papua New Guinea's role in the regional order. The unseen stabilizer beneath Pacific waters, the hinges connecting Asia's dynamism and the Pacific's resilience. We are not the largest nor the loudest, but we are central. Central to geography, yes, but more importantly, central to trust, continuity, and the quiet strength that holds the region together. We are the first to meet the sunrise from the Indian Ocean, and the last to watch it set across the vast Pacific Ocean. Geography for us is destiny, but of course leadership defines its mission. Our position is not passive. It is active, deliberate, and strategic. We are the keel that absorbs the pressure of shifting tides, from climatic shocks to geopolitical currents, and we do so with resolve. And we know and understand that India understands this. It sees Papua New Guinea not as a peripheral actor, but as a strategic hinge, a partner that can help balance the Indo-Pacific canoe. Our shared commitment to maritime security, institutional resilience, and regional unity is not just inspirational. It is operational. It is embedded in training exchanges, in diplomatic dialogues, and in the mutual respect that underpins our cooperation. As we navigate the Indo-Pacific together, let us remember that the keel is not always visible, but its absence is always felt. Papua New Guinea will continue to play this stabilizing role quietly and with purpose. Today, Papua New Guinea contributes approximately 75% of the Pacific's total GDP. That is not just a statistic, it is a strategic signal. It tells us that Papua New Guinea is not merely a participant in the regional economy, we are its engine room. Our natural resources, LNG, gold, copper, fisheries, magnesium, forestry, you name it, we have it all, have long formed the backbone of Pacific growth. But we are not content to remain a quarry or a port of extradition. We are now shifting the paradigm from resource extraction to value creation, from exporting raw materials to building sovereign capability. This transition is deliberate and visible in our port modernization programs, which are transforming PNG into a logistic hub between Asia and the Pacific. It is evident in our LNG expansion, which is not only boosting exports, but also anchoring energy security for the region. Most powerfully, it is seen in our investment in small and medium enterprises, the true lifeblood of inclusive growth and national resilience. Economic gravity equals strategic leverage. A strong PNG economy is not just good for us, it is good for the region. It strengthens the Pacific's sovereignty by reducing dependence, creating options, and asserting that development can both be indigenous and also globally connected. We see India has been a valued partner in this journey through concessional finance, technical cooperation, and a shared belief in the South-South solidarity. As we deepen our economic transformation, we welcome partners who invest not only in our resources, but also in our people, our institutions, and our long-term resilience. In the Pacific, Papua New Guinea is not just a keel. We are also the engine powering forward, not alone though, but with trusted partners who understand that economic strength is the foundation for strategic autonomy. Our defense force, the Papua New Guinea Defense Force, may be modest in numbers, between 2,400 and 5,000 personnel, but our operational depth and regional experience are proven. We do not measure our strength by size alone. We measure it by resolve, readiness, and the ability to restore balance when the region calls. From Bougainville to the Solomon Islands and Vanuatu, we have deployed not as conquerors, but as brothers. Our mission has always been restorative, to uphold peace, rebuild trust, and reinforce the sovereignty of our Pacific family. These deployments are not acts of projection, but affirmatives of solidarity. We cooperate closely with Australia, New Zealand, India, the United States, and the United Kingdom. And we value these partnerships deeply. Yet, our guiding compass remains clear. Security cooperation must never become strategic dependence. We welcome support, but we do not outsource responsibility. Our doctrine is rooted in sovereignty first, partnerships where cooperation enhances, not replaces, our self-reliance. So India in particular understands this principle. Its defense engagement with Papua New Guinea is built on mutual trust and capability building, not conditionality. From officer training to maritime domain awareness, India's support strengthens our institutional backbone. It reinforces our ability to act independently, even as we collaborate regionally. In today's Indo-Pacific, the role of a stabilizer is not passive. It requires vigilance, interoperability, and strategic clarity. Papua New Guinea is investing in all three through force modernization, regional exercises, and the development of a defense posture that is both sovereign and cooperative. We're not a buffer, we're a balancer. And our commitment to regional peace is not reactive. It is constitutional, strategic, and enduring. In today's world, connectivity is sovereignty. The ability to transmit data securely, communicate without constraint, and access digital infrastructure is no longer a luxury. It is the foundation of national resilience and regional agency. Papua New Guinea is quietly transforming into the digital hub of the Pacific. We now operate over 5,600 kilometers of terrestrial fiber and 4 major subsea cables. That's the Pipe 1, Coral Sea, PNG, LNG, and Kumo. These are not just cables, these are arteries of independence, carrying data, knowledge, and resilience across oceans into communities. Each cable represents a strategic choice to connect outward, but remain sovereign, to welcome partnerships, but retain control. These systems underpin our e-government platforms, financial networks, education systems, and emergency response capabilities. They are the invisible infrastructure of sovereignty, and they are growing. We envision a Pacific-India digital corridor, a strategic pathway that links data sovereignty and shared prosperity. This corridor would not only connect our fiber and subsea assets, but also harmonize cybersecurity standards, digital trade protocols, and regional innovative ecosystems. It would allow our students, entrepreneurs, and institutions to collaborate safely and securely across borders, equitably and at scale. India, with its leadership in digital public infrastructure and inclusive technology, it is a natural partner in this vision. From Aadhaar to UPI, India has shown the world that digital transformation can be both sovereign and scalable. We seek to learn, adapt, and co-create, not replicate. So in the Pacific canoe, ladies and gentlemen, connectivity is the outrigger. It stabilizes, extends, and enables. Papua New Guinea is building that outrigger with fiber, foresight, and friends who understand that digital sovereignty is the new frontier of strategic autonomy. Papua New Guinea's greatest resource is the people, and it's enshrined in our constitution. True sovereignty lies not only in territory, but in intellectual, institutional, and generational strength. PNG serves as the Pacific's human capital engine, producing leaders, innovators, and resilient builders of regional progress through its universities, vocational institutions, and training academies. Through the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, PNG is deepening strategic partnerships with India to align education, maritime technology, digital innovation, and human mobility, building a skilled, sovereign, and future-ready Pacific workforce. India's experience in scaling education and industrial innovation offers valuable models for PNG. PNG's approach is one of co-creation, adapting and embedding these lessons with its own cultural and constitutional frameworks. Industrial capacity is also expanding from agro-processing to marine engineering, transforming raw potential into strategic capability. The goal is that every young Papua New Guinea should not only work, but lead. Human capital is power, and education is the pedal that propels regional development. PNG is crafting that pedal with purpose and welcomes partners like India who invest in minds and not just machines. In summary, Papua New Guinea's diplomacy is defined by balance. Firm when needed, restrained when wise. Its voice is purposeful, not provocative. Through platforms like the Melanesian Spearhead Group, FIPIC, and the Pacific Islands Forum, PNG projects calm authority and helps shape Pacific consensus with strategic clarity. It addresses sensitive issues like West Papua, climate security, and regional autonomy with cultural depth and historical awareness. And a constitutional commitment, of course, to peace. Its diplomacy harmonizes rather than weaponizes, reflecting the respectful, realistic, and reconciliatory spirit of the Melanesian diplomacy. In the Indo-Pacific soft power, in the Indo-Pacific, let me say that again, in the Indo-Pacific, soft power is not weakness. It is wisdom, the ability to convene, influence, and lead without coercion. And we believe India shares this sort of approach. The civilizational diplomacy grounded in dialogue and development resonates with PNG's values. Through FIPIC, India engaged not just with governments, but with communities and cultures. PNG will remain a trusted regional voice, steady, principled, and committed to unity. Finally, Papua New Guinea's regional call to action is anchored in 5 strategic pillars, guiding the Pacific towards sovereign resilience and cooperative strength. Firstly, the economic engine, which builds resilience through inclusive investment in fisheries, marine biotech, sustainable tourism, and ocean logistics. Second, in defense, a stabilizer that protects maritime sovereignty by enhancing surveillance and developing interoperable systems that serve Pacific interests first. Third, digital secure Pacific data pathways by strengthening connectivity, harmonizing cybersecurity, and asserting digital sovereignty. Fourth, education. Expand human capacity, mobility via scholarships, vocational exchanges, and joint research, empowering youth to lead while preserving cultural roots. Finally, diplomatic voice. Promote agency-driven partnerships that respect Pacific sovereignty and foster cooperation through humility and mutual respect. This framework is operational, rooted in constitutional priorities, strategic realities, and cultural values. It is the keel, sail, paddle, and compass of the Pacific canoe. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, when Papua New Guinea advances, the Pacific moves forward. It is not a slogan, it's a strategic truth. PNG serves as a compass for the region, guiding the Pacific towards sovereignty, stability, and shared purpose. The Pacific is not just peripheral. It is central to global cooperation where diplomacy is dialogue, development is transformative, and security is a promise. PNG leads with dignity, not dominance. powering economic growth, securing maritime space, connecting digitally, and investing in human capital. Leadership is measured by contribution and not control. India has shown that great powers can engage with humility. PNG invites others to walk alongside, to listen, build, and respect Pacific agency. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us move forward together with purpose and unity. The ocean connects us. It is our shared space, responsibility, and future. Now, very quickly before I end, the MOU that was signed yesterday is a strategic bridge between visions and execution. A shared commitment to building regional capacity, shaping maritime governance, and strengthening the Pacific's collective voice in the Indo-Pacific. Indeed, we look forward to collaboration becoming capability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Illau. I would like to share with you two thoughts that I have here, one food for thought and then one remark. What I keep out of your brief, Ambassador, would be this very strong message. We welcome partnership, but we keep control. We welcome partnership, but we keep control. This is a very strong message. And then food for thought here, Ambassador, because you were speaking about being the keel of the canoe. From what you've said, if you were a naval vessel, I would rather see you at the wheelhouse, at the helm. This is food for thought for you. Thank you. Now, I would give the floor to Marianne to tell us about how France and the Pacific Islands integration into the Indo-Pacific mainstream. Thank you, Marianne.
So you have my presentation. That's very good. Okay. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, you will understand that I want to warmly thank the National Maritime Foundation and the Indian Navy for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to participate in such a stimulating conference. And I'm going to share with you a few thoughts and explain why the Pacific Island matter for France. And in my view, the reason is very simple. France is not only a neighboring country in the South Pacific, it is an island country itself through the geographical nature of this presence in the region. New Caledonia is an island. French Polynesia is made of a multiplicity of islands, and Wallis and Futuna as well. And that means that France shares a lot of perspective, including political and security concern with its main neighbors, and as an island countries face the same level of vulnerability in front of present issue already mentioned here, climate change, natural disaster, and have the same level of difficulties to monitor its very vast maritime domain against EU fishing, illegal activities, traffic, and for example, has drug smuggling. So, in a way, it is a direct actor of regional integration and development in the South Pacific. So, as some of you may know, France adopted the Indo-Pacific concept very early because it felt that this concept helped to legitimize its presence in the region and consolidate its status as a resident power. But in the strategic document it published, it tended to think of the Pacific, to think of the Indo-Pacific from the perspective of its office in Paris and mainland France, and its Indo-Pacific territories at the very beginning of the conception of the strategy were not involved in the development of its initial Indo-Pacific thinkings, and they complained bitterly about this. And this is why France decided this year to, after a round of consultation with parliamentaries of French Polynesia, New Caledonia, and Wallis and Futuna, to update the Indo-Pacific strategy, initially published by the French Minister of Foreign Affairs in 2022. And in my presentation, I will try to review the evolution of this strategic document, explaining France's Indo-Pacific strategy in order to better identify the place of its territories and their role, and how they have become full-fledged player in France's Indo-Pacific vision. And on my slide on the screen, you can see President Emmanuel Macron speaking last June at the Shangri-La Dialogue, this year, and he spoke at length. He is the president of the Indo-Pacific. He spoke at length about the Indo-Pacific because he saw it as an opportunity to increase acceptance of France's presence in its territory and to increase the status of France as a global maritime player. And in 2018, in a speech delivered in Sydney and then during a visit to India in March of the same year, he discussed the strategic importance of the region and the danger posed by, I quote him, new form of imperialism. And he also visited New Caledonia and Réunion the year following, the first visit of a French president to these territories in a very long time. And it was at this time that he spoke of a France-Australia-India axis. His vision was to make India the essential pillar of cooperation with France in the Indian Ocean and to do the same with Australia in the South Pacific. So the partnership with India is stronger than ever, while the partnership with Australia has suffered from the AUKUS episode and is currently being rebuilt. Oh, sorry. Sorry. So let us turn now more precisely to France's global vision of the Indo-Pacific and the role of its territories, and more precisely how can France integrate its Pacific Island territory into the Pacific mainstream. So for a very long time, France used to say that it is an Asian nation. And the response was generally to that, no, you are an European nation. And even today, when China is a bit upset when seeing a French frigate crossing the Taiwan Strait and said, for example, that France has no business to do in Asia and should return to Europe. But with this Indo-Pacific construct, which is a geopolitical concept, it is easier for France to gain acceptance for its presence by presenting itself as an Indo-Pacific power and relying on its territories. So France, through its 7 territories, Mayotte, La Réunion, the French Southern and Antarctic territories in the Indian Ocean, and New Caledonia, French Polynesia, and Wallis and Futuna in the South Pacific, is a resident power into the Indo-Pacific. And these territories are seen as asset, not only for France, but for its partner. They contribute to legitimate France's presence in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific by enabling it to exercise responsibility and to participate more actively in regional integration. Regarding now more precisely in-depth Trans-Pacific identity and presence, as you can see on the slide, France usually introduces itself as saying it's the only European Union member state present in Oceania. This was also a way to convince EU to get more involved in the Indo-Pacific and its peer threats, because the European Union published an Indo-Pacific strategy, or a strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific in 2021. And this came as an advantage for France from benefiting from the support of EU, because EU is developing very much initiative, notably in the maritime security in the whole Indo-Pacific. And as you can see on the slide, France has 7 embassies in the Indo-Pacific and is having a very vast exclusive economic zone over 11 million of kilometers square, which is the second largest in the world. And it's this vast maritime domain is at the center of France's blue diplomacy and involvement in the defense of ocean, as illustrated by the strong support of France in favor of the BBNG. And just a fuel map when you can see New Caledonia embedded in the Melanesian area and French Polynesia more in Wallis and Futuna, more on the side of the Polynesian cultural area. Just jumping in the first Indo-Pacific strategy of France, which was elaborated by the Ministry of Armed Forces in 2019. And the fact is, France has developed quite a lot of Indo-Pacific strategy. The first one, as you see, from the circle of defense, and so insisting on the military responsibility and the part that France is taking in the security on the region, but also with the Indo-Pacific strategy elaborated by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The accent is, of course, more putting on the region stability and the contribution that France is bringing to the prosperity of the whole region. And as I already mentioned, the MOFA strategy had to be updated and was updated this year in July. And of course, you can see on the slide the protection of the French national and French territories, and EEZ, this vast EEZ, is one of the focus of the Ministry of Armed Forces. But there is also in this strategy a strong focus and insistence on multilateral approach and the contribution contribution of France to peace and security, and also, and this is very peculiar to the French armed force in the Indo-Pacific, there is a strong involvement in environmental security. Just to say a word on the strategy of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, France is quoted in this strategy as stabilizing forces in the area, and this strategy came in 2022. That means that during the 3 years after the first Indo-Pacific strategy, the security context in the area and at the global stage had changed quite a lot. And there was a need maybe regarding the acceleration of the rivalry and competition of great power, not only in the Indo-Pacific but at the global stage, to insist for France on multilateralism and insistence on the rule of law, but also on multilateralism and also following this permanence linked to the specific accent on climate change, biodiversity, and France's involvement in sustainable management of the ocean. And mentioning the partnership of France, you can remark that India is quoted as at the first place, followed by Japan and ASEAN country. The last update I quote regarding France's strategy and France's perception of the Indo-Pacific was having a more pessimist tone than the precedent, because we are in 2025. There have been the war in Ukraine and the impact of the war in Ukraine in the Indo-Pacific region, with the perception of a very tougher strategic competition, great power rivalry, trade tension, worsening effect of climate change, biodiversity loss. And this is the expression of a will to resist and try to counterbalance this negative trend that you can see in the logo or the motto of France in this strategy, resisting the logic of bloc and trying to work on emergence of new and trying to fight emergence of new bipolarization. And of course, France wants to present itself as another option, as a third way, speaking of being non-aligned, being cooperative, inclusive, and trying to convince a goodwill partner to, I will say, follow this positive posture and trying to be open to collaboration and cooperation. This discourse, which is very present in France, perception of the Indo-Pacific and its posture in Indo-Pacific is reflecting the recent geopolitical trend in the South Pacific, with China being more visible, with the US increasing its military and diplomatic presence, but also Australia trying to step up with the Pacific Step Up and revigorate the Quad, engaging in AUKUS and in defense tie with Vanuatu, and France, fully aware of this very different trade, try to consolidate its presence in the South Pacific, politically having the travel, as you may know, with New Caledonia. It tried to propose and work on a new status for the territories, and it has in parallel strengthened its maritime capacity in the region to have a more military asset dedicated to the protection of the vast maritime domain, not only its maritime domain, but the maritime domain of its close neighbor. And in this spirit, France launched a regional Coast Guard Network Forum and had become very active in the South Pacific Defense Minister meeting, SPD-MM, where India may consider to join. So the French response to growing rivalry in the South Pacific and pathway to integration is, as I already said, reject any logic of confrontation, promote integration of its territory in their regional environment, and to insist on cooperation and enhancement of multilateralism. And so he had 4 pillars to advance this integration: a climate diplomacy, putting this accent, as I already said, on environmental security, developing a blue diplomacy, having also the development of a defense cooperation taking into account the interests of the region, reinforcing its diplomatic presence and economic investment, and also developing a cultural diplomacy and local empowerment to be considered as a member of the Pacific family. The political and economic dimension of the regional integration of France. We already mentioned the Pacific Island Forum, which is the main regional organization, with New Caledonia and French Polynesia included as full member in 2018. In 2016, we had also France considering and following the line of the strategy for the Blue Pacific, but also trying to stick to the objective of regional security encompassed in the BOE Declaration. France active within the Pacific community, developing a specific regional program for environment, and I would like to insist on the role of the French Development Agency toward this Kiwa initiative, where we are expecting India to join, working with PNG on biodiversity, and not to forget organizing this One Ocean conference in Nice and presenting the signature to the signature of the participants, the BBNG. France also is participating also in a France Oceania Summit and try to develop a common strategy with its partner of the Pacific Island Forum, and this is a very active forum. Regarding the security dimension or regional integration, of course, France tried to answer and to be a part of the security dimension and protection of the South Pacific state. So there are many ongoing initiatives. The French Australia-New Zealand trilateral cooperation agreement for fighting natural disaster has been already mentioned. There are a lot of, I would say, initiatives linked to HADR in the region regarding the specific vulnerability of this region. So France is a part of the Red Cross network, training the civil society to deal with this natural disaster. France is considering to support the Pacific Quad, which is helping the Forum Fishery Agency to fight EU fishing. And France also is, with the means of the French Navy in the area, contributing to maritime domain awareness and giving quite a support to the Pacific Fusion Center. I had to finish, sorry. I just wanted to put a light on the French Polynesia and the role of leadership in the blue diplomacy of its president, Moetai Brotherson, because really French Polynesia has a very vast maritime domain, and in order to protect all of these resources, the president of French Polynesia decided to declare a new maritime protected area and created indeed the largest maritime protected area and try to give this, I will say, initiative as a model to follow in the region and try to convince its fellow island leader to extend their MPA in the region, and also is advocating to suspend any seabed exploitation. Time's up. I'm really sorry. Just to go and to finish and to give a proper conclusion to my presentation, of course, France South Pacific territories are central to, of course, its Indo-Pacific strategy. Of course, there are some political and economic evolution, and France is trying to follow the aspiration of autonomy of these territories. Both have elected parliament and president, which enables them to be an active member of regional organization. And France is hoping that by fostering inclusive governance, respecting local aspiration, and strengthening cooperation and partnership with the region, it can contribute to a more stable and cooperative Pacific future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marianne. From what I can see from a French perspective, we do have a lot on our hands, don't we? We are very ambitious. We need to consolidate our presence. Obviously, our Indo-Pacific strategy changed a little bit, as you noticed, because we have these legitimate questions which are asked to mainland France about autonomy, so we had to change a little bit our focus and legitimize our position in the Indo-Pacific. But then we've been there for a long time, so we need also, I heard the words consolidate our presence through a number of initiatives and long-term strategic partnerships that we've been going on over the years. Now, I will leave, because we need time, so I will leave you with Admiral Chauhan, who will take us through the FIPIC and leveraging the Forum for Indo-Pacific Islands.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that in the next 20 minutes I will try and answer a fundamental question which has been asked to me or of me for the last 2 days. What on earth is India trying to do in the South Pacific when it is having a hard time reaching areas that are closer to us? So on the one hand, we could maybe quote Robert Browning, the famous poet, who said that a man's reach must always exceed his grasp, or else what's heaven for? But that won't answer this particular question adequately. So I thought I would start by, first of all, asking each one of you to allow me to shed and take off 2 hats. The first hat is that of an ex-naval officer, and the second hat is that of DG-NMF. I want to talk to you about something that I think, as a person, merits some consideration. And even if we were to allow for the NMF and my capacity in that organization to be held accountable for what I'm going to say, it nevertheless is that the NMF is the knowledge partner of the Indian Navy. And if knowledge has to be acquired and worried, you have to get new ideas. Some of them have to be difficult ideas to accept, and some of them have to be those ideas that you ought to be ruminating over a great deal. So let me start. This map has been shown to you adequately, but I want to talk to you about the Taiwan crisis and start from there. Because what FIPIC has to offer has many, many facets, and what India has to do in the South Pacific has many facets as well. Let me begin with the US and its South Pacific segment. This is shown on the map. Many of these you are familiar with: Hawaii, Midway, Wake. These are nostalgic memories for those of you who are from the Navy and have studied all these areas. Midway is no longer of consequence because Midway is no longer held by the United States as such in its habitable form. Wake still is, and Guam is. So let me talk to you about Taiwan. First of all, once again, let me reiterate, these are my views. Okay. The US-China conflict over Taiwan is always going to be, in my opinion, a binary, which means that if this conflict should take place, one of 2 results can only occur. One, China will win, and the other is the USA will win. If China wins, then that is the end of the US global world order everywhere in the world, not just in the East China Sea, not just in the South China Sea, not in the Pacific, but in the Atlantic, in the Arctic, in the Antarctic, and most certainly in the Indian Ocean. If, on the other hand, the USA wins, then this is going to be as a result of the huge amount of faith that China has invested in the forcible reunification of Taiwan into the mainland. It will be a massive blow, which is likely to topple the Communist Party of China. And that means that we are talking about a risk of toppling the strategic center of gravity of China itself. Now, when risks are so high, players tend not to play. Because if we were to just take a simple example of tossing a coin, and if I was to toss a coin and it came heads or tails, we would probably play the game. And if we said that you can buy me a cup of tea or a Coke or a beer, at the end of it, we would play. But if I said that if it comes heads and I win, I will take a machine gun and kill your wife, children, parents, everybody. And if it comes tails and you win, you can do the same with me. You will not only say that I'm nuts, but you won't play the game. In other words, when the stakes are very high, players tend not to play. And in the Taiwan case, the stakes are very, very, very high. That doesn't mean mistakes won't happen. That doesn't mean stupidity doesn't win, because very often there is no answer to stupid. Stupid is just stupid. So now let's look at the USA and India's options. If our best option is that status quo is maintained, the USA and China do not fight. This is India's best option. But if they do fight, then the USA must win. And the reason I say that is because if the USA loses, then China is free to redeploy its entire orbit against India. Now the next question is, why the hell should China worry so much about India? Is it because India produces submarines and India produces aircraft carriers and India is producing missilery of advanced forms, or India produces drones? None of all this. The Communist Party of China is bitterly opposed to India because we do yoga. We breathe in. We breathe out. We do shwas andar lo, shwas bahar chodo. We exist, and we exist as a democracy. And because the greatest vulnerability of the Chinese Communist Party stems from domestic stability and not from what India, USA, or anybody else does, this means that while India was poor and a misbegotten country, China could point, the Chinese Communist Party could look at the Chinese people in the mainland and say, see, if it wasn't for us, you would be like that, miserable, poor, dirty, hungry. And it was great. So India served a really good purpose for the Chinese Communist Party. But then India remained a chaotic country, as close to a functional anarchy as you can get. We remain chaotic, and yet we are improving. We are pulling, our economy is galloping. We are pulling hundreds of thousands of people out of poverty every day. And now the Chinese people are looking at this neighbor, not at Taiwan, because Taiwan is so small, not at Singapore, not at Hong Kong, because they have no scale, but India. India is next door, not separated by one ocean. It is next door, and it is doing well. So the Chinese people are thinking, wow, maybe there's another way. Maybe we don't need this Chinese Communist Party. Maybe we don't need some top-end dictator. And that is anathema to the Chinese Communist Party. And therefore, if you think that if the USA were to lose, China would not concentrate upon India, then I'm afraid, from my perspective at least, you are living in La La Land. This will happen. Therefore, it is in our interest to ensure that A, the fight doesn't take place. How do we do that? We go every day to the Chinese in whatever fashion we can, conveying a signal to say, because we all know here in this hall at least, that you cannot fire the first shot in a battle before you have shaped the environment. You must first shape the battle space. And if you haven't shaped it, don't fire yet. We all know this. Our job is to go and tell and signal across to China every day, today, you haven't shaped the environment yet. And tomorrow we should go and tell them, today you haven't shaped the environment yet. And day after tomorrow we should go and tell them, today you haven't shaped the environment yet. In other words, you will never shape the environment. It will never be okay to fight. So as a consequence, if at all we are to persevere in this action, you must now understand a couple of maps. Can you see that pecked line reading from the continental United States through Hawaii across to Guam, and from Guam going on towards the Philippines? and thence to Taiwan. This is the axis that the United States must maintain in strategic terms. If this axis is disturbed, then the USA will not be able to defend. What is China's strategic aim, therefore, in this area? Topple this axis. But still doesn't count, India doesn't come into this yet. So let's look at this. These colored blocks are the Northern Mariana Islands, which belong to the USA, the Marshall Islands, which are part of a compact, which I will just show you, and the Federated States of Micronesia, and then on the extreme west is Palau. Now, there was a compact of free association, which all the previous speakers have alluded to. I just wanted to mention one aspect of it. It applies to Palau, the Marshall Islands, and the Federated States of Micronesia, otherwise acronymed as FSM. And it says, the government of the United States has full authority and responsibility for the security and defense matters in or relating to the Marshall Islands and the Federated States of Micronesia and Palau. So this grouping and that block, of course those blocks are not the country, that's the whole EEZ. But those countries and that block is US. Then at the bottom, you might have not noticed that, but at the bottom you've got another one which is American Samoa. That's the grouping of America. Okay. Then the greens, this is Australia. And these are the countries that Australia enjoys considerable influence in and over. So that's the Australian segment. That axis, you bear in mind that axis. This is New Zealand, which is Cook Islands, and then Samoa, and then, what have I got there? Tokelau, and then there is Niue. So those are the influence areas for New Zealand. So these are the allies, okay? Then there's France, about whom we've just heard twice. And so if you put them all together, this is the map you get. Sounds good? Looks good? Southern flank, well protected. Northern flank, internal. Now, in May of 2025, China established contact, communication, promises, deliveries as well, with all of these countries which are now shown in red. And now you can see that that whole Federated States of Micronesia was called into Beijing and asked, so what is it that you want that we can give? And they said whatever they could. And so what I'm trying to show you is the strategic game. And in the strategic game now, what is China doing? It is trying to outflank the axis of freedom by concentrating its strategic gameplay south of that axis. So you are looking at the southern flank being now toppled or tackled by China. Now, insofar as India is concerned. First of all, India is not in this game for the sole strategic purpose that I've mentioned. It is not. India seeks to achieve a certain set of geo-economic goals and a certain set of non-geo-economic goals, which are on your screen. And of them, I wanted to emphasize the following. One, in the geo-economic goals, which is highlighted, which is the transition from a brown economy to a blue economy, or a brown model of the economy to a blue model of the economy. And in the non-geo-economic goals, there are 4 factors that India is seeking. Build and enhance India's prestige and its reputation for wise and sagacious regional leadership across the Indo-Pacific. Next, membership of the UN Security Council and change in the UN Security Council. The third is to be the preferred security partner within the Indo-Pacific. The fourth is to be an inspiration to the global south. In order to be able to achieve these goals, put the strategic game away from your mind in a minute, I'll connect it again. We have several constructs. One of the constructs that India has is a set of trilaterals. Now, these trilaterals are many, there are 7 of them, plus the Colombo Security Conclave, but of relevance to my presentation to you today is India, USA, Japan, India, Indonesia, Australia, India, Australia, France. These are the 3 trilaterals that we must be able to try and leverage. now we go back to the islands and now talk about FIPIC. So FIPIC was established in November of 2014 in recognition by the Prime Minister of India, the present Prime Minister Modi, during a visit to Fiji. And this was done in recognition of the Indo-Pacific as a continuum. In other words, you cannot take the Indo-Pacific and say, I'll look at only this part. Many Indians say, we will only look at the Indian part, the Indo part. So we are trying hard to tell people that, I'm at least trying hard to tell people, stop calling it the Indian Ocean. Start calling it the western segment of the Indo-Pacific. Stop calling it the Pacific Ocean. Start calling it the eastern segment of the Indo-Pacific. Or stop using the term Indo-Pacific. And stop saying that we are interested in the Indo-Pacific. One of these two options must exist. So in these 14 island states that comprise the FIPIC, we have, as you can see on the screen, I'm not going to go down the slides, but you can see the green slots. Now that's the Indian segment. You remember what I just showed you about the Chinese segment? That was it? That's FIPIC. So now what are we doing at the grand strategic level is that we are supplementing, we are outflanking China, trying to outflank the USA. That's what's happening. Now, are we planning, plotting, scheming? I don't think so. But it's happening nevertheless. So, when we talk about outside of the grand strategic plane, we must talk about what India is seeking. So, and what must India be doing? Why is India involved in all this, apart from this part which I told you wrapped around China? It is, first of all, the geostrategic significance of these islands are related to their location, their maritime resources, their votes in the international fora, such as the United Nations. They are the means to counterbalance China, which I've already told you, and to promote cultural and diplomatic ties. We've had 3 FIPIC summits. Lots of people in Europe, you had so many presentations just now, 3 of them. Did anybody mention in the main part of their presentation FIPIC? No. They just said, oh, we are in India, we better say FIPIC to somebody. And people ask me, what is FIPIC? And therefore, our fundamental challenge in India has been and remains that we are hopeless at strategic communication. We don't know how to publicize. We don't know how to market. And we must learn this. Maybe governments are hopeless anyway. Perhaps that is the case globally. Perhaps in the United States of America, they need to go to Madison Avenue. Then who should we go to? But there must be professionals who do this. After all, we are selling washing machines in Balia. If we are able to sell washing machines in Balia, that means we have really good marketing skills. Why aren't we bringing those marketing skills to bear here? Why is it that we don't have a group of people saying, tell me about FIPIC, what's happening in FIPIC? Why do we have a people saying, FIPIC, same to you? So clearly, though we've had summits, we've had an inaugural summit in November of 2014, we had a second summit in Jaipur in Rajasthan in August of 2015. Then, as was pointed out, we had a sideline meeting in 2019 on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. And then we had a third summit in Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea. So in that, we have developed 12 action points, but you don't know them. Do you know them? Why don't you know them? Why aren't they being taught to you in schools and colleges and in think tanks, etc., etc.? So what are really the challenges? The challenges are, number one, there is an absence of any robust strategic communication and outreach strategy. You have a Prime Minister says he's going, panic! Prime Minister aa raha hai, Prime Minister ja raha hai, Prime Minister ja raha hai. Then Prime Minister ho aaya. Then after that, okay, next, what is happening next? In other words, just like Professor Wongi Shwe said yesterday, we lose track. We lose focus, and we cannot proceed to be a big power if that is going to happen. So we have no permanent secretariat. There is no formal treaty structure. There's no regular coordination mechanisms like they have in the ASEAN Secretariat. And without institutional visibility, momentum fails. There's inadequate public diplomacy, as has already been pointed out. Many of those other dynamic structures like the Pacific Islands Forum, the Pacific Community, the Council of Regional Organization of Pacific, that is CROP, etc., exist. We need to pull ourselves up for that, in that regard. And so, as a consequence, how should we leverage FIPIC? First of all, we should socialize the term. We should sensitize our people, our government. Our government is sensitized, but our people, all the policy shapers, all the policy, all of academia, all of you. And then leveraging FIPIC differs for India from everybody else, because India does not approach FIPIC with this idea of geostrategy. I said that, but that's not what the government is doing. What the government is doing is saying, not only what is it that we can help you with, much more importantly, and this is what I asked Peter Illau earlier, I want to know what is it that you bring to us? What can India learn from Fiji? What can India learn from Vanuatu? What can India learn from Tuvalu? What can India learn from the Marshall Islands? How do you balance economics and economic extraction of minerals and living resources with ecological sensitivity and environmental concern? How do you do this? We don't know this yet. Our states, we mouth it, but we don't know it. And so they can bring things to us, rather than only thinking that we are the world's Vishwa Guru. We will speak and you will learn. Now, there's no surer way of making enemies than that. And therefore, there are many, many areas that we, in fact, will and must learn from the South Pacific. Only then will we build a relationship which will offer an asymmetry between what we are doing, what China is doing, and what the remaining powers of within the geostrategic, geopolitical space are doing. I'll stop there and say thank you very much, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Admiral Chauhan, for a very, let me say, honest and humble recognition that FIPIC may not be yet up to India's ambitions as a tool to outflank China, one of the tools to outflank China. And thank you for explaining in very simple terms India's grand scheme to outflank China, outflanking the US. That was very clear. So now I propose that we hand over the floor to questions. And as usual, I will take 2 to 3 questions and hand over to our speakers. So the first one here was the gentleman right in front of me with a white shirt.
Jai Hind. Myself Gudrun Wacker, I'm a student of Rashtraksha University. My question is from Dr. Wacker ma'am. Considering China's growing economic and infrastructural influence across the Pacific Island, how can democratic Indo-Pacific nations cooperate to counterbalance this influence without pushing the region into another form of great power competition? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other competitions in this way dealing with China so that we can address those questions now? Any questions dealing with China? Yes, please.
Good evening, dignitaries. I am Anurag Sharma and I work as a consultant in space diplomacy. I would like to just put a little perspective on the argument of Admiral Pradeep and all the other dignitaries. And my questions would be to everyone, and there will be one part to Dr. Wacker. If we expand the argument a little bit more, what if China and US makes a deal and the G2 kind of format takes place? In that case, the playground would be bigger, and the Pacific region will become a playground between China and US. And all of us will have to deal with the situation in that case. Now, Germany had been a great military power in the region up until 1914, and even after that also. But the situation changed. Now, geopolitical realities are again changing, and Germany is building its military-industrial complex back. Can there be a possibility where they start looking at the Pacific theater as well. And collectively and bilaterally as well, India and Europe or India and Pacific regions could cooperate in building the capacity in case the fourth possibility turn out to be reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Did our two panelists here, we'll stop here for a minute. Did our two panelists, Admiral Chauhan and Gudrun, did you understand the questions? Did you get the questions?
I didn't understand. Acoustically, it was sort of blurred
Yeah.
a second.
Bilo, would you help us, please,
What
to understand the questions of this gentleman?
What I understand the question is that what if the USA and China were to enter into a deal, and then the South Pacific area would become a playground between the two of them, and then the playground would expand in size, and then really speaking, what would be the role that India could, would, or should play, and what would happen with Germany, which used to be a great power, military power in years gone by, and is now arming itself again, albeit for a different purpose, but nevertheless it is improving in its military power. And then how would Germany play out? Am I right? Did I get the question right? Just put your hand up and...
Yes, sir. Just
Okay,
a little bit more argument.
No, bus.
Just addition to what you said.
We will run out of time.
Yeah, you need to make it short. Yeah, please.
Okay, I start with the first question. I think we have to accept that for most countries, China is a viable partner. You heard this morning from some members of ASEAN countries that they don't want to point fingers. ASEAN is still trying to negotiate a code of conduct with China about the South China Sea. As unrealistic this may sound, but China will not disappear. It is an economic powerhouse. At the moment, maybe it's less power and more house. It has a lot of economic difficulties, but it is there and it is present everywhere. So this is not only the Pacific Islands where China is making inroads, it's also African countries, in the mining industry, in everything. And for most countries, the question is what kind of agreement do they negotiate with China? And you see there are very different countries in Africa. Some negotiate to their own advantage with China and others cannot manage that. So I think we have to accept that China is making inroads. They have a very long vision of what they are doing and they're very systematic and clever about it. And for example, in diplomatic presence compared to India, they are really everywhere and with a strong force. I mean, I don't think that any European country, with the exception of France, has military attaches in the Pacific Islands, but China has them. And for you, it's a different issue because you consider yourself as a resident power. So this is something we have to accept. And the countries in the region, like Papua New Guinea, etc., they don't want to be told who they can partner with. So we talked about earlier about agency. And I think the export, what China is exporting, it is not their political system. It's surveillance technology and things like that that are important to countries that are less democratic, let's put it that way, or that have a leader who wants to have the population under control. So I don't know how to counterbalance China except if we all get together, and that's not very likely. Plus, there is the fact that for the countries themselves and their needs, Chinese aid is an alternative to what the West has neglected for a long time. And I would say in the case of Australia, a lot of people said Australia got what it deserved because it neglected the Pacific Islands for a long time, and especially the issue of climate change. So I think we have to take this into consideration before we say, how can we counterbalance? I think the Chinese are there, And we can only make more attractive offers and learn from these countries how they balance. That's another thing we can probably learn, because we see that there are limits to what China can do, like the collective security agreement that was refuted. And the second one, I don't know what I should say about Germany rearming. I think from my perspective, in our vocabulary, the word deterrence did not exist for 30 years. So after the end of the Cold War, Europeans became very complacent about their own defense because there was no threat. The Cold War had ended, we had won, so what? But now with Russia invading Ukraine, deterrence and the purpose of our armed forces to be able to defend our countries is back on the menu. And the US and China, if they make a deal, I think this is the fear. Admiral Chauhan mentioned Taiwan. This is the biggest fear of Taiwan, that there will be something like a grand bargain between the US and China, and that Taiwan is on the menu in this case, which means, and even without that grand bargain, the question for Taiwan is now, would the Americans actually intervene in a military conflict between Taiwan and China, and would they come to Taiwan's help? Which, if they don't do it, will probably mean the end of the alliance system in the Pacific.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure, and may I invite you to jump on this?
I just wanted to emphasize that what you're asking is whether we are seeing a continuation of great power competition, or whether we are veering around to great power collusion, which is something that was mentioned on day one. And this has happened in the past, such as the concert of Europe at the end of the 19th century. But it doesn't end well. And secondly, but more importantly, these are ephemeral situations that you are building upon. No nation's foreign policy or no nation's defense policy is made on a 4-year principle of what is happening in a given country for a given period of time. After 4 years, administrations tend to change, and often they change quite radically. So countries, by and large, take a much longer view, a longer time horizon. And I don't know, I'm not an expert on Europe, but I can certainly say that India takes a longer view than you might think. And so the worries in India are not as acute as to whether President X or Prime Minister Y or President Z and will or will not for something or the other. So I think that where FIPIC will continue and what India's approach is not what I've told you. I already mentioned to you, I'm going to put my various hats back on, but what I told you was that FIPIC is about development. And it is not about, so when you offer a country a hand of friendship in development and you are culturally sensitive to that country, the chances of you remaining friends with that country are high. Even if that country ends up, I mean, Papua New Guinea is being wooed by everybody. We are wooing Papua New Guinea, Europe is wooing it, France is wooing it, China is wooing it, everybody is wooing it. But Papua New Guinea has to come to a conclusion that in some areas I would go with X, in some other areas I will go with Y, but going with India will have the greatest return for me for the longest period of time. If we can build that bridge with Papua New Guinea, we're singing.
Thank you very much. Dear audience, may I ask you to ask one question at a time, short, clipped questions, and please try no ChatGPT written question. So short, clipped. Thank you very much. That was not aimed at you, of course, sir. But short, clipped question, one question at a time. Thank you. We have a gentleman down there, up there, sorry. And may they address our other panelists, please.
Ma'am, I have a specific question for Vice Admiral, sir. Sir, you have thought of a situation where USA wins. Sir, I fear, why don't you fear, sir, that since India is surrounded by US military bases also, for example, Diego Garcia, what if US pursues a policy of India's containment post the Taiwan war, the hypothetical war that we have discussed? Thank you, sir.
Okay, another question. I could take a second one. Diego Garcia in Taiwan. Right, okay. There's another gentleman at the back, and then we'll take one up front.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Ayush Bhardwaj. So my question is to Marine ma'am. Ma'am, my question is, given France's strategic geography across the Indo-Pacific, with territories like New Caledonia, French Polynesia, and Reunion, how can French reconcile its dual identity as both as an external European power and an intrinsic Pacific stakeholder to advance true regional integration? Thank you so much, ma'am.
Can you help us again on the question? Could you please repeat your question, sir?
He said that if, oh, sorry. You can.
Go ahead. Our French ears are not accustomed to I'm very sorry about this.
I'll go slow down, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
My question is, ma'am, given France's strategic geography across the Indo-Pacific territories, like New Caledonia, French Polynesia, and Reunion, how can France reconcile its dual identity as both as an external European power and an intrinsic Pacific stakeholder to advance true regional integration?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So maybe we'll address those two questions because we'll be running out of time. So the first one was addressed to you, Admiral, about Taiwan, and Diego Garcia.
All right, so this is not about either Taiwan or Diego Garcia. The question is that if the USA was to win, then what is the next step for the USA? And will that then be detrimental to India? And will India now be sought to be contained by the USA? It is entirely possible. All things in politics are possible, and each country must develop contingencies for that possibility. So to that extent, you are absolutely right. What will India be doing? India continues to currently build its own intrinsic capabilities, and this whole business of trying to go to Atmanirbharta and reduce single source dependency is precisely for this reason. Whether that country involved is to be named as X or country involved is to be named as Y, but India desires to make its own, after all, India's interests are India's. They are not determined by somebody else. And so India will create the mechanisms, it is trying to create the mechanisms, the capacities, the capabilities, which will reduce its single source dependencies, but recognize the fact that we are still nevertheless living in an interconnected world. And so what we will try and do all the time, and what we are trying to do, is spread our risk. And rather than having everything from one chap who eventually might not like you, put some eggs in the European basket, some eggs in the Asian basket, and most of the eggs get laid and hatched in the Indian basket. Thank you.
Marianne, please. On France's dual position.
Sorry. Yes, dual identity. I won't say that really. France is insisting on this resident situation, being a neighboring country. France is also reminding all of these neighbors that it is a EU country, but work quite actively regarding the regional integration of its territories, meaning that in their own capacity, La Réunion is a part of many regional organizations. First of all, IOC. France is in the back seat. France could be an observer or a dialogue partner. It's the same thing in the South Pacific. It was quite, I will say, a victory to see that the region was accepting the French territories as full member. Because at the end of the day, they consider some advantage to integrate this so-called French territory in their regional organization. And again, full membership for New Caledonia full membership for French Polynesia, and France as a dialogue partner. That means that, politically speaking, these territories have their own personality, their president, their parliament, and they can exerce their own choice. And of course, France is there with its military forces and I will say some diplomatic orientation. But let's consider that finally the trend and the positive trend and the possibility of integration come from the region itself. You see, after considering effectively France with its embarrassing historical legacy, not to forget nuclear trials in the South Pacific, finally the region and the littoral state consider that they could have advantage to help France in this, I will say, definition of new political relation with its territory. And as you may understand, it's an ongoing question, history with New Caledonia.
Thank you, Marianne. Do we have a question for Ambassador Illau, please? Yes, please.
Thank you. Christian Suprianto from Indonesia. Ambassador, I think your presentation quite clearly explained PNG foreign policy and its priorities and its interests, but I have some questions specifically to ASEAN. I understand that PNG is aspiring to join ASEAN, and just from your point of view as an aspirant state to PNG, how do you think ASEAN has performed in terms of managing geopolitical competition in the Indo-Pacific? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a useful question. My answer will be my personal answer, not reflective of my government. I think in my 7 years in Indonesia, I tried really hard to get the Papua New Guinea governments at that time. But there are other dynamics as well. There are members of ASEAN who feel that Papua New Guinea is not ready. There are members of ASEAN that fully support Papua New Guinea's inclusion. I have to be careful what I say here, but I think ASEAN is important. There's no doubt about it. It's important to Papua. We are the bridge. Papua New Guinea is the bridge between Asia and Pacific. And Papua New Guinea does more business with Asia than the rest of Pacific. I think the time will come when that choice will be made. I think that choice is just around the corner now. Given all the pressures of geopolitics at the moment, I think that choice will be made fairly soon. I'm also speaking as the president of PNG Indonesia Business Council Incorporated in Papua New Guinea. And the government's given me a task to try and attract more business, more interactions between Papua New Guinea and Indonesia. Okay, so that's a hat that I do wear. But I think, in short, ASEAN is important, and our neighbors within us, different notifications over the years of where to go, where not to go. I won't call names, but over the years, they have gone ahead and joined ASEAN. We haven't. We remain as an observer, you know that. But to answer your question, it's important, and we continue to do that. I want to take the opportunity to also answer the young man's question on the other side. I think it's important that I answer that question from someone who's on the ground, not someone outside looking in. Look, China has championed the center of gravity for Pacific, and it's economic dependency. Economic dependency, okay? And they've identified that. Their knowledgeable people have known that the weak spot, the vulnerable spot, economic vulnerability. Whose fault is it? The colonial powers who gave independence only gave political independence. They had no plans for enabling economic independence. And we're paying the price today. All right? So if anyone wants to solve the problem between China or US, you really have to go back in there and see the football field. How are they playing? Are they playing among tall grasses? Is the football field leveled? Are they using real soccer ball, or are they using some coconut shell? So the issue of the question of what if, we can what if, and we're only going to create more uncertainties. I want to say that the SWOT analysis of the Pacific has been done 100 times over, but no one pays attention to that SWOT analysis. And we're still asking what if. And that's the reason why we get confused. And when you bring in initiatives like FIPIC, when the sponsors of FIPIC hold back and watch how the subjects, the target people inside respond, the people inside are also holding back because they're not too sure where the parameters of these initiatives are going to be. You saw the response of ASEAN countries towards China, Papua New Guinea, and the rest of the Pacific. The kill is unseen, all right? You don't see the kill, but you know that the kill is most important, and that kill is not understood by people outside. But China has worked out the buoyancy of that kill. That's why they're championing it. It's not a military issue. It's a political issue that has been wired to try and win loyalties from different sides. I just want to end by saying that much of what you see in the trends today in the Pacific are merely politics. But if you go and talk to the heart and soul of Pacific, people have their own views about China. People have their own views about US. People have their own views about Australia. People have their own views. And they're not necessarily the views that you understand from academic and all that research. It's different. All right? So that's why I use the metaphor of a canoe, because it's a traditional platform. Time's gone past, technology's come in, but the canoe's still there. When you go to Papua New Guinea, people still fish, and I think in Asia it's the same. People still use canoe to go and fish, because that's the heart and soul of those communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear panelists, our time is up. Dear audience, our time is up for questions, so it's time for me to summarize, which is a hard job, of course, for me. So let's make it clear. The Pacific center of gravity, I'll take your last words here. Pacific center of gravity may very well be economy. We may be very late, we may have been very late on realizing this, but this is what it is right now. Gudrun reminded us that China is a fact. We can't go around it, we can't make it disappear. It's not a dream, it's not a nightmare, it's there. And it's an alternative also for all those countries who have vulnerabilities. So it's an alternative, and we have to admit this. So we can probably offer better alternatives. This is what we should be doing instead of, saying, oh my God, China is doing this and China is doing that. All right, let's think in a positive way. What can we do better than China, which would be more effective, which would be more confidence, more trust? So we can make more attractive offers. Another very important message that we got here is that Pacific countries don't want to be told what to do. And there we go back to the French principle and strategic sovereignty partnerships. Sovereignty partnerships offers to any country the choice that they want to make. We're here, we can be in support, we can be counseling, we can be whatever you want. You want to go there? You're free, feel free to go there. You want to go there? Feel free to go there. Okay? Sovereignty partnerships. Those countries, Pacific countries, don't want to be told. Another important thing is that you've realized with Admiral Chauhan's presentation that India's future may very well lie in the Pacific. He told us about India's grand strategic scheme and what would happen if there were a war between India and China, and if one of or the other were to win, and the consequences on India. And you made this very clear, by the way. So yeah, there is probably, that's what you said, Ambassador, a need for clarification on the FIPIC. It's been going on for, you've explained this since 2014, a need for clarification, explanations, and the real will, a thrust forward now that the need for India is clear. And on another hand, what you said, the last words that you said were that PNG is a bridge between Asia and Pacific. And again, you took again the canoe, because of course this is the, I mean, we don't have canoes in France, of course. That's why I'm going back always to what I'm familiar with, this Navy stinking engine room and everything, and thinking, yeah, you are somewhere at the helm or the rudder or whatever you want, but steering. But let's keep the canoe there. You can steer the canoe also and be the keel, no problem. All right, let's end our panel here. We've had very insightful thoughts and ideas for the future. Thank you, audience, for your questions. And maybe we should give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral Cullere. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to announce the release of another pertinent volume in the NMF's flagship publication series, entitled Maritime Perspectives 2025, Hard Security Issues. It offers a holistic overview of evolving warfare, with several conceptual additions to the commonly understood idea of hard security. This volume is edited by Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, DG NMF, and Captain Kamlesh K. Agnihotri, Senior Fellow at the NMF. I now invite His Excellency, Mr. Sanjeev Ranjan, to join us on stage for this ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, this volume identifies the Indo-Pacific region as the proverbial experimental arena in which the application of so-called agglomerated hard power by various players, including China, is sought to be played out. With all our dignitaries now on stage, I request them to lead with the book release. Thank you very much. I request all dignitaries to step ahead of the table, and in the same breath, I request His Excellency to also offer tokens of our appreciation to all our panelists. Yes. Please step ahead of the tables. Yes. We start with Dr. Gudrun Wacker. Ambassador Peter Illau. Vice Admiral Anne Cullere. Commander Marianne Perron-Duas. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our panelists once again.